Another important area where policy is evolving is, of course, the area of monetary policy. Romney said last year on the election campaign he would not reappoint Ben Bernanke as Fed chairman. He also criticized the Federal Reserve's policies of quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve greatly expanding its balance sheet to provide more liquidity in the financial markets. There's no doubt if Romney had won, we would have had in 12 months' time probably a more conservative, more restrictive monetary policy. But with Obama back in office, there's no resistance now to Bernanke's policy. Now, what's unclear is what Bernanke himself will want to do next year when his term ends. His term ends in January of 2014. There are lots of rumors, having been on the job now for 8 or 9 years, he wants to leave and go back to Princeton, write books, and be an academic. If he does leave, there are two frontrunners to take his place. The first is the current Federal Reserve chairwoman, vice chairwoman, Janet Yellen. She's been at the Fed now for a few years. She was previously the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and she very much supports Bernanke's monetary policies. If she gets the job, American interest rates will stay low indefinitely, and there could as well be further balance sheet expansion. In fact, the Fed will decide next week to expand its balance sheet by $85 billion each month in the new year. $45 billion of mortgage-backed securities and $40 billion of government bonds. This will mean the Federal Reserve balance sheet will grow in the year ahead by a further $1 trillion. Alternative candidate is Roger Ferguson, who was a Fed governor 10 years ago. He currently runs CREF, the big college retirement fund. He would also be a candidate to carry on Bernanke's policies. If he got the job, he would be the first black Federal Reserve chairman. So we have pending, a year from now, the possibility of either our first woman Fed chairman or our first black Fed chairman. But whoever they are, they will carry on Ben Bernanke's monetary policy, which means low interest rates for quite a long time. And this will, on the margin, I think, be a modest negative for the US dollar, a positive for the gold price, and possibly a positive as well for the US equity market. So there are many different areas of policy in play right now. The big pending issue is the fiscal cliff. But over and beyond that, we have still the evolution of new financial regulations, new energy policies, new environmental policies, and a whole new strategy for dealing with the rise of China as a possible new hegemonic power in Asia. Now, I think if we can resolve our fiscal problems, there are reasons to be optimistic on the US economy over the next 2 years. We currently have 6 very positive forces at work in the economy. And I want to finish up by reviewing those 6 positive factors. The first is Ben Bernanke's monetary policy. He is giving us at the current time the most expansionary monetary policy in American history. 0 interest rates for the 4th year in a row, and the Federal Reserve greatly expanding its balance sheet. This policy has no precedent in our history. It's very, very aggressive. It's because Ben Bernanke is very determined to bring the unemployment rate down to below 7% from currently 7.8%. Secondly, we've had over the last 3 years a very dramatic recovery in US corporate profits. They've doubled and given us a huge stock market rally. They were a year ago a very big positive for capital spending. But now, because of the uncertainty about the fiscal cliff, capital spending has closed quite dramatically here in the last 4 or 5 months. But I do think once we resolve the fiscal problems, these very strong profits will create the preconditions for recovery in US capital investment. Thirdly, we've made progress with consumer deleveraging. The household sector now has reduced its debt by over $1 trillion since 2009. And because of low interest rates, household debt servicing payments have fallen from 14% of personal income to less than 11%. The current ratio of household debt servicing payments is back to where it was in the mid-1990s. This is a positive for consumer spending. Fourthly, After 6 years of very severe recession in the housing industry with big price declines, a collapse in building activity, we are seeing for the first time now since 2006 signs of recovery in the housing sector. We've now had 4 or 5 months of gradual price increases. We've seen home building activity go from just 500,000 starts to over 800,000 starts. And we're seeing as well a very important recovery in our rate of household formation. Household formation 10 years ago was 1.4 million per annum. During the recession, it fell to 500,000. Now it's back over 1 million. And household formation is very important, of course, to housing demand. So we could have, a year from now, housing starts over 1 million. And going out 2 or 3 years, back to 1.2 or 1.4 million, where we were 10 years ago. And this will be a big positive for the economy, because during the recession 5 years ago, we lost 2.3 million construction jobs. We've so far regained only 60,000. We could create, in the year ahead, several 100,000 new construction jobs. And this would be a very big positive for the U.S. economy's growth rate and for household spending and consumer spending. And finally, as I mentioned a minute ago, we're in the midst of a great oil and gas boom. North America, in 10 years' time, could be self-sufficient in oil. There are big increases going on in U.S. output. Canada's developing the tar sands. That could double the oil production over the next 10 years. And Mexico is probably on the verge of a new revolution in energy policy. 75, 80 years ago, Mexico nationalized the oil industry. They banned all foreign investment. Today, Mexico has one oil company, Pemex. It controls everything: gas stations, oil production, refining. And it's not very sophisticated. There has been, over the last 5 years, a big drop in Mexican oil production. Mexico must drill offshore, much deeper waters than it has so far. But it needs help to do that. And that means Mexico has to change its constitution to allow foreign investment, to allow foreign partnerships. And the new president of Mexico, Mr. Enrique Pena Nieto, who took power last week, has promised to do this. And if he does, I could see in 3 or 4 years a big recovery as well in Mexican oil output. So North America will be, in 10, 12 years, self-sufficient energy. It won't need the Middle East. It won't need Venezuela. It won't need oil from anywhere else in the world. And this is, I think, a very, very important development. And it means a very major improvement as well in the American current account deficit, because the U.S. currently runs a very, very large trade deficit in oil in the hundreds of billions of dollars. This will be as well, therefore, a positive for the U.S. dollar. So we do have, I think, going out 12 or 18 months, the possibility for the U.S. economy to rebound from a growth rate only around 2% to possibly as high as 3%. That's not a boom, it's not robust, but it's a big improvement compared to where we've been. Because since the recovery from the recession in 2009, our growth rates average only around 2.1, 2.2%. The most subdued recovery we've had in the modern period, something quite unusual when the economy's had a very severe recession. But again, we had in this recovery some very unusual financial constraints. We had the collapse in house prices. That wiped out $7 trillion of household wealth. We had over-indebtedness, which required deleveraging. And we had as well problems in the financial system. American banks had huge losses back in 2008 and 9. Now American banks have had a great recovery. American banks reported their profits last week. In the third quarter of this year, they made $140 billion of profits at annual rates. And bank equity asset ratios are now over 11% compared to 9% 3 years ago. So banks are basically in much better shape. This improves credit access. A big change from where we were in 2008 and 2009. So there are a variety of reasons to be optimistic about the U.S. economy if we can resolve our fiscal problems. But this will be the big issue of the next 3 weeks. It's a very complex issue. It's an issue which has very, very profound consequences for many American politicians, and therefore it won't be easily resolved. And my fear is it may take in the next 3 weeks a major stock market decline to break the gridlock, to achieve a consensus, and to go forward with an effective fiscal policy. And all we can do right now is stay tuned and watch and see how this plays out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Thank you very much.